Yeah, it's much different if there's already administration in there like there has been in the past.
Yeah,
So it makes sense to go back there
yeah.
and do the meetings,
But now
but not
everything-
now when there's a transition going on.
Everything's changing.
And
So
I
you
do
know Mr. Scott Pruitt?
I know of Mr. Churrit. I have a call with Janet McCabe today at noon.
Okay.
Just trying to make sure she gets it out. I was hoping this week, so we'll see.
You know, they're doing some things up there to try and get the students in before January.
Everyone's
So,
calling
yeah.
so this right now.
It's terrible. Chelsea opposed person.
So
I asked Mary about it. Mary actually had some press release on it because she think that
so all
can't just change the Clean Air Act.
all three sides are on. All three sides are on. We're viewing two, and we have Councilman Crispino and then at the Lux. Supervisor Luxford is there. She can see us.
Yours down, please cancel, because I don't see
But she can
yours.
hear us. She can see us.
So Joe is on.
He's down, please.
Bill is
Joe
on.
is not there yet, but
Oh,
he
He's
is.
gonna be on.
He's gonna try us.
Is Clark?
But Clark is not there yet.
Not yet. Okay, so then we have Clark and Rutherford. Okay. So we can go ahead, I guess.
Yeah,
There's three of us.
There's no votes.
There's no votes, it's just information. Okay. So, good morning, everyone who's here, and good morning, Dr. Burke. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Legislative Committee. And the first things on our agenda are reports from the federal and our state consultants. You have written reports that have come with the agenda, but I will ask for each of our consultants to give us an update, a verbal update on anything that they would like to add or emphasize in their reports. So the first is Carmen Group, and we have Gary Hoitzma on the line. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. My written report includes a rundown, which we submitted last week, includes a rundown of the Trump administration cabinet appointments so far. And I have a few updates to report just to bring us up to date here. We're hearing this morning over the transom that Interior Secretary may be Kathy McMorris Rogers, Congresswoman from Washington State in the House Republican leadership there. That's not confirmed yet, but that's what some of the media is reporting today, so that's an interesting one. Labor Secretary, fill in some blanks here. Labor Secretary, the appointment was made Andrew Pudster, CEO of the restaurant group that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. HUD Secretary, Housing and Urban Development, is Dr. Ben Carson, retired neurosurgeon. Homeland Security Secretary announced is General John Kelly, Marine General, former Commander, U.S. Southern Command. And finally, EPA Administrator, you've heard that Scott Pruitt, Oklahoma Attorney General, has been named to head the EPA. And I'd like to take a little bit of my time to just say a few words about Scott Pruitt. I know we all have an interest in that one. Just give you a quick little background. Scott, as I said, is the current Attorney General of Oklahoma. He's been elected twice to that position, first in 2010. He's a close confidant of Senator Jim Inhofe, who I used to work with. I met with Senator Inhofe yesterday, and he praised him very much. And I also attended a conference yesterday at the Conservative Heritage Foundation which was a conference devoted to climate and energy issues, and the consensus there was that Pruitt was the best choice that Trump could have made from the conservative standpoint. Now, the flip side of that is that he is considered the worst choice by most of the environmental groups and many of the Democrats. So you're looking for to see quite a heated confirmation process for Mr. Pruitt, no doubt. Quick couple of points about Scott. He grew up in Kentucky. He moved to Oklahoma to go to law school. He had a small law practice for a while, and he was elected to the Oklahoma legislature, and then he became Attorney General. And in his role as Attorney General, he's been very active in challenging the EPA regulations, the Clean Power Plan, the Waters of the U.S. rule, and others. And, he's been the lead litigator, basically, among the attorney generals in the 28-state lawsuit against the Clean Power Plan, which is now before the courts and may eventually go to the Supreme Court. So he's, considered by, most of the environmental community as tied very closely to the oil and gas industry. And he takes an approach that puts the primacy on the federal role. In other words, that he believes that states have the prime responsibility for enforcing pollution standards and that sort of thing rather than the federal government. And he points to provisions in the Clean Air Act that say that that's the way things should be. Well, as I said, I think he will have a very contentious confirmation hearing, and there'll be almost united opposition among the Democrats from what we're hearing at this point. His confirmation will go through the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, chaired by Senator John Barrasso in the new Congress there. So that sort of concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any additional questions about Scott or anything else in my written report.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any questions from any members to Mr. Leidsma? Nope, we have no questions here. Thank you so much for your report. Is there anything else to add to it besides the appointments? Well,
as I say, in my written report, I made note that the Federal Highway Administration has finally announced the alternative fuel corridors that we've been reporting on in previous efforts here. So we've been following that very closely. So that is announced now, and the alternative fuel corridors for electric, hydrogen, propane, and natural gas vehicles will be a work in progress. And there's 85,000 miles designated to be signed to designate where fueling stations will be, and it's set up such that many more miles can be added to that as new stations are developed. So that would be the one I would emphasize there. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we wish you a happy holiday. Thank you for joining us today. We will hear from you again in January, and we'll probably have a lot more to report then. So thank you so much. And we'll move on now to Cassidy and Associates, and we have Amelia Jenkins on the line, I believe, to report from Cassidy.
Good morning, everyone. This is Amelia, and our entire Cassidy is here. So we provided an update on the House of Representatives and changes in the House of Representatives for the incoming Congress. A special note are the new Democrats from California, which we listed in the memo. Some close to South Coast territory and others in South Coast. But the balance of power, given the Democrats gained 6 seats, is 241 Republicans to 194 Democrats. We anticipate, in terms of the new Congress, that the Senate will be fairly focused on the confirmation process for the first several months of the session. But the House will likely take up some pretty large issues ahead of the Senate. And I mean, obviously, in order to pass those bills, the entire Republican caucus will need to be united. What may come up first are a bunch of regulatory rollbacks from the House will consider either under the Congressional Review Act, which is a special process for looking at regulations that are finalized at the end of one administration. But they also can look at repealing regulations that are not in that window or are not major. So the memo we provided for you discusses different ways those regulatory rollbacks can move forward. And we also gave staff a list of both the major regulations that can be rolled back through the Congressional Review Act and also other pending air quality related regulations at EPA. I think the important thing to think about with the Congressional Review Act, and there are 2 EPA regulations dealing with methane emissions from landfills that have been identified as major regulations. But if Congress is to revoke those regulations through the Congressional Review Act, a future administration cannot move to seek similar regulations. So it is a very strong repeal process, and obviously it takes 60 votes in the Senate for that to happen. The only other updates from a House standpoint is in the memo we discussed who was running for chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. The person that will be the chair is Greg Walden from Oregon. He is very knowledgeable about regional energy issues, which are primarily public power issues because his region is, most of the power is supplied through Bonneville Power Administration. And they've had a challenge with integrating wind energy. So that is a perspective he will bring to energy issues in his new role. The district that he represents is not air quality challenge, but the state has had a big debate over coal export facilities and fugitive coal dust. So that's something that he's heard about in the context of his own district. The other thing of note is that obviously with Governor Brown appointing Congressman Becerra to be Attorney General for the state, that leaves a vacancy in his House seat. In addition, his role as Democratic Caucus Chair is Congressman Cardenas, or Cardenas, I'm sorry. So he will emerge, and then that's very good for the district in terms of a profile within the Democratic leadership. Finally, the energy bill is dead. Long live the energy bill. It humped to a slow and painful death, mainly over provisions that have to do with public land and funding for new purchases of public land through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It was a grave disappointment to the Senate that they couldn't get even a narrow package through. But we can look to that package in one form or another being reintroduced early in the 115th Congress, and it's certainly something we should keep our eye on. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Amelia? And good morning, Dr. Parker. Glad to see you with us this morning. So,
good morning.
It appears there's no questions here, Amelia, so thank you so much for that report. We want to wish you happy holidays, and we'll look forward to the next report because we assume that a lot will happen between now and then. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll move on now to Cadiz and Associates. First, we have Mark is going to be on the line. Is Mark going to go first? Good morning,
Yes,
Mark.
I will. Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair and everyone. In our report, we talked about the impact of the elections on the Senate, and as I think everybody knows, the Republicans have retained control of the Senate. They've gone from 54 seats this Congress. They'll go to 51, or after the runoff election tomorrow in Louisiana, probably 52 Republican votes. So it'll be a slimmer majority this year. Well, the House has really concluded their activity for the year. The Senate still has to pass a continuing resolution. They've only passed one appropriations bill for the year, so the entire government needs to be funded. And it looks like what the plan is to try to extend the funding at last year's levels, current levels, through the end of April, although there are a couple issues that may make this a long weekend and early next week. Senator Manchin from West Virginia has some concerns about how they're handling minor pension and health issues, and there's some other issues going on. The only other thing to wrap up for the Senate this year is the Water Resource Development Act, which includes the Flint, Michigan funds, but that is unfortunately being caught up in an intra-California fight also. Senator Boxer and Senator Feinstein are disagreeing about some provisions in a drought bill that passed in the House as part of the WRDA bill. And as Amelia just said, we were hopeful for an energy bill, and part of the reason we wanted to see that, as you all may have noticed, that it included a 5-year DERA reauthorization. So that will not happen this year, although the impact, because it's the authorization, will not have any impact on the funding for this year. The appropriations will still continue, and it should not have any impact on funding, but we will have to push for a DERA reauthorization next year, and that's both important to us and potentially an opportunity to make some changes in the DERA program that we've been thinking about. And I would just conclude by saying, as I think I included in the report, there have been a few changes on committees that we care about, primarily the EPW committee. Senator Inhofe, has termed out, so Senator Barrasso will take over as chair, and obviously Senator Boxer is retiring, so Senator Carper of Delaware will be the ranking member. And the only other change, I think, of a committee that's very significant to us is that Senator Leahy will take over the ranking member of the Senate Appropriations Committee as Senator Barbara Mikulski has retired. So that really concludes my report. Also happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mark? Nope, there seem to be no questions here, Mark, so we'll go to Chris Keurig next. Have a happy holiday.
Right.
No?
Actually, I think I've included Chris's report on appropriations on the CR.
Okay.
So I think that was our full report.
Okay, that's your full report. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
And again, happy holidays. We'll hear back from you.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Well, we'll go to the state issues next. And we have Paul Gonzalez with Gonzalez & Sons. Paul, are you on the line? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. I hope the holiday season's treating you all well. I just wanted to touch on a few things from my written report. First off, the Volkswagen settlement. As you know, California has reached a partial settlement with Volkswagen, resulting from their illegal defeat devices in their 2-liter vehicles. This does not include the 3-liter vehicles that have reached a settlement yet. The settlement requires Volkswagen to invest $800 million in zero-emission vehicles in California over a 10-year period. These projects the eligible projects include installing zero-emission vehicle fueling infrastructure for both electric and hydrogen-powered cars, funding brand neutral consumer awareness campaigns that will help grow that market, and investing in projects such as car sharing program that will increase access to ZEVs for all consumers in California, including the low income and disadvantaged communities. So they're hopeful these projects will support the next generation of California ZEVs and help grow the ZEV program and lay the foundation for the state to reach their air quality and climate change goals. Last Friday, I attended a CARB workshop where they discussed their suggestion to Volkswagen for their $800 million 10-year program. The staff discussed areas of qualified investment, which include the ZEV infrastructure, the public awareness, increasing access, and green city projects. They also discussed potential guiding principles and priorities for the first ZEV investment plan, and they discussed the process and timeline associated with the development, review, and approval of the first plan. So now that that has taken place, CARB will develop a guidance document that will communicate our California's priorities and guiding principles for the investment plan to Volkswagen, so that way they can use that in their drafting. And the one big thing to understand is that CARB is just a guiding source in this. Volkswagen, as long as they can reach a deal with CARB, will actually be doing the allocating themselves. So we will continue to be watching that carefully to see where we can maximize the benefit for the district. Next, I'd like to quickly cover the transportation special session. As you know, the last two-year session officially ended on November 30th. And on November 22nd, the governor and legislative leaders came out and announced that the last-minute potential deal on transportation funding plan would not happen this year. They would not go for a lame duck session to try and get it done. As you know, the governor's put forward a $3.6 billion transportation plan. The Democrats would like to see something more around $6 or $7 billion. But the long impasse really was caused because they couldn't reach a deal with the Republicans to get the two-thirds vote. The governor and the legislative leaders have both announced that they're committed to approving a transportation funding deal. But the question really remains is that can they, now that they have the two-thirds supermajority in both houses, can they strike a deal with the more moderate Democrats and the targeted Democrats to get them to put up a vote for a tax increase? Speaker Rendon on Monday during the swearing-in announced that he wants to see a bipartisan transportation deal put together, and this is really because they picked up three seats from the Republicans, and to put them up on a tax increase vote out the gates would be very difficult without some Republican cover. So we expect this to be a part of the governor's budget, the transportation plan that he'll release next month. And we're going to continue working closely with the governor's office and legislative leadership to ensure the funding for SCAQMD. Lastly, I just wanted to note a couple of the upcoming legislative deadlines that are really important for the committee to know is looming. January 4th, the legislature reconvenes for the 2017-18 legislative session. The governor will release his state budget on January 10th. January 20th is the last day to submit bill requests to Legislative Council, and February 17th is the last day to introduce those bills. So we have already seen a number of bills introduced, ranging from immigration to transportation and all types of things. As you know, a majority of the bills being introduced this year, being that's the beginning of a two-year session, will be spot bills, and we most likely won't see a lot of those things come to fruition or committees even start up until late March. So it'll probably be a slow start to the year, but I'm sure it'll get very hot and heavy as things continue, and we will continue to stay on top of things for the district. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and want to wish you all happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, Dr. Burke has a question. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Can you explain to me what happened on Organization Day on Monday when Chad Mays ran for Speaker with 25 votes?
Dr. Burke, I wish I could explain that, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. We were actually over there at the Capitol in the gallery watching this, And my brother and I looked at each other in confusion. We actually expected Chad to be nominating Speaker Rendon as well. So it kind of took everybody by shock, but I would just say it's more partisan politics than anything.
Okay.
So that explains it all for us. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Link up with
Any other questions on Paul's report? Let me mention on the VW settlement monies, because this was before the Air Resources Board yesterday. And there's, on the consent decree, there's a number of appendices. And this one is Appendix C. Okay, I'm looking at Barbara.
I remember the appendices, but I don't remember.
But two funds that we're really looking at are this one, which is the 800 million that comes to California. But it is, as Paul said, it's not a fund over which CARB or the state will have a lot of control, because it's VW's investment, which they have to make into California, and CARB will help with the guidelines. They will oversee it, so they'll have some authority over what happens, but not a lot of authority. But our board discussed it yesterday, and we made comments about what we think should be in the guidelines. The money will be divided into 4 cycles of 30 months each. And our priority for the first cycle is zero emission vehicle infrastructure. We think that that is very important to get the charging stations, the hydrogen stations up, so that, you know, as we move forward with these zero emission vehicles, there's charging available. So just in a nutshell, that was one of the things that we discussed yesterday. Also, part of that plan is that, according to the CARB guideline, is that the 25% of it goes to disadvantaged communities. Then that is that's not mandated by our cap and trade rules or by 585, 575.
And actually, it's under existing law.
Okay, so it's not mandated under state law, but we want to issue that as a guideline for expenditure of those monies.
05, or basically the DUBA 35%, and 25 in disadvantaged, and 5 in low income, and another 5 in low income near disadvantaged.
Right, yeah.
50-50.
Yeah, so the guidelines just mentioned 25% to disadvantaged. We didn't go into that kind of detail, but as I said, it's not mandated. And disadvantaged communities is not also identified under this program by Cal EnviroScreen. So there may be another look at you know, the profile for disadvantaged communities. So the 381 million that is in the other appendix, which I think is Appendix D, that is amount of money over which California will have control. A lead agency has to be appointed. That the agency is appointed by the governor, and then whoever the lead agency is will have some say-so over how that money is spent. But we are looking at that money to go primarily to heavy-duty trucks and the turnover in that heavy-duty fleet. So that's where we should be keeping an eye on, so that we, you know, get our say-so in that pot of money. Okay, thank you, Paul, and I want to wish you and yours happy holidays, and we will see you back here in January with more to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Looking forward to it.
And next we can turn to Will Gonzalez from Gonzalez, Quintana, and Hunter and Cruz, the long name. Good morning, Will. We're looking forward to your report.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'll be brief. A couple updates to our report in the general update section. We reported, obviously, Attorney General Kamala Harris won her U.S. Senate seat, with the governor appointing Javier Becerra to fill her spot for the next 2 years as California's Attorney General. As we noted, starts the cascade effect amongst the seats. We reported that the former Speaker John Perez has already announced for Becerra's congressional seat. Since our report, Assemblyman Jimmy Gomez from Los Angeles has also announced for that seat. And we're also hearing that Sarah Hernandez, former staffer to City Councilman Zay Huizar, will likely also be announcing for that seat. So, the cascade begins. Jimmy Gomez just was reelected, so he's got a safe run, so we shouldn't see any changes or impacts immediately on the makeup of the LA delegation in the Capitol. But more to come on that. Very quickly, we mentioned in our report about, as Paul mentioned, that we now have a Democratic supermajority in both the Assembly and the Senate. The Senate has the bare minimum for a supermajority, and the Assembly has one Democrat to spare. So there's a lot of discussion about what that means, and obviously, South Coast, we have some major priorities this year that supermajority can be helpful for. Suffice to say, it's too soon to tell what this all means. Obviously, for procedural votes, budget votes, the 2/3 is helpful, mostly for procedural. At the end of the day, the November's election got us 2/3 in both houses. However, we've also seen the election of what folks believe to be a lot more moderate Democrats. Obviously, those folks will, once we've had some tough votes and we see how members start aligning, we'll see just kind of what that moderate Democratic block of votes looks like. But we know it's likely gotten bigger in both houses, so that will impact just how profound the 2/3 supermajority truly is. Lastly, as Paul mentioned, bills have been introduced, but a couple that I wanted to flag for the committee, given the South Coast priority in this coming session, is the Senate's package, which they're calling California Rebuild. It's a package of 4 bills, 4 major funding bills covering everything from transportation, trade corridors, housing, market rate housing, and affordable housing. The 2 bills that are of interest to us, and we've already started engaging with leadership and the authors about just, what opportunities there might be in these bills for South Coast. One is SB1 by Senator Bell. He's the Senate Transportation Committee Chair. This is the main vehicle for in the Senate for transportation funding. Raises a host of gas taxes, vehicle registration fees, weight fees, all aimed at raising money for the state's transportation and infrastructure, which is sorely needed. I raise this bill of interest because obviously there's a lot of funding sources in there that have been traditionally funding sources that air districts have looked at to raise money for air quality incentive programs. So both a blessing that there's legislation looking at this area that we might be able to get into, could also complicate things as some of those funding sources are already being tapped and makes perhaps gives us fewer options. But we're in discussion with Senator Bell. We've talked to the Pro Tem's office as well, and we'll continue to do that. The other more directly aligned with South Coast is SB4 by Senator Mendoza. This is, if you recall, Prop 1B. This is kind of a round 2 of Prop 1B. It would put a state bond on the ballot potentially for the next cycle. And it fairly mirrors the Prop 1B style, focused on trade corridors, both the infrastructure and air quality improvement. The bill's fairly, kind of yet to be developed, but again, potential opportunity for us to get in that bill, find some specific funding sources for South Coast priorities, and specific to trade corridors could also raise some interesting opportunities for us to raise new funding sources, maybe not outside of the initiative process. So we're not beholden to wait for that and the voters. So again, the upside here is the Senate is clearly focused on these funding measures. They are in line with areas of interest to the South Coast. So I think it's given us an opportunity to go into these offices and start expressing our interest in getting involved in these bills and where South Coast can possibly benefit from these bills. So we'll be working on these very diligently and see what opportunities there are for the district. I think that's the extent of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, happy holidays to all.
Thank you. Will, any questions for Will?
Well, I just have an observation, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I'm looking at a poll right now, which indicates that Jose Huizar has 20. This is in that 34th congressional district. Jose Huizar has 34%. Monica Garcia, if it was held today. Monica Garcia has 14%. Nick Pacheco has 5%. Jimmy Gomez has 10%. And John Perez has 3%. Now, it's my understanding that the top three vote getters are going to drop out and support Jimmy Gomez. So I think that it's going to be a very difficult hill for former Speaker Perez to climb.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep an eye on that. So what's the timeline on that election? Can anybody tell me that?
So once Javier Becerra takes over as Attorney General and sworn in, then there's a special election that's called.
Mm-hmm.
So typically it's about 2 to 3 months after Javier Becerra resigns from his position and the governor calls that election. It's probably going to, if all things point to the way Dr. Burke is saying, probably not going to be a runoff. If he gets over 50%, then I think
then that person is in. Yeah.
The governor has 14 days to call the election after the resignation of Kamala Harris, which is likely to happen on January 3rd when she takes office as senator. And then he's got he's got to choose a date between 126 and 144 days after, so it's 18 to 20 weeks. And then you count backwards to the primary. So what's likely to happen is the March 7th city election will likely be consolidated with the primary election for this special election on March 7th. And then the general runoff would occur in late May, early June.
Okay, so there's a little bit of time there to watch what happens. So nothing is certain. Thank you. Supervisor Rutherford, I just wanted to recognize you. We can't see you here, but I understand that you are with us. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm here and I can see all of you.
Okay, well, good. Now we can see you. When you speak, it comes up on our screen. So good morning to you. We missed you at our last board meeting, so we welcome you back here today. We don't really have, we're going to pull item 3, which is the report from the Home Rule Advisory Group. I believe that the report wasn't finalized and we need to, it was a draft that needs to be reviewed. Does any member of the committee have any other business that they want to bring before this committee?
Madam Chair, I just joined you. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, good morning, Councilman Buscaino. How are you? Good to see you this morning.
Good. Sorry, we just had a report on the 2024 Olympics coming to Los Angeles. Know we're pushing for a sustainable green Olympic Games in 2024.
Great. Okay. Good. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. I think it'll be a very wonderful thing for our city to get that. And where we are now in the agenda is I've just reported that item 3 on the agenda has been pulled because it was a draft report that hasn't been finalized. And I've asked if any member wants to bring forward any other business to come before this committee. Seeing none, we will ask now for any public comment from any of the remote sites as well as here. Does anyone want to come forward and make any public comment? Seeing a lot of people in the audience, but no hands are raised. So, okay.
No one here at the Lux.
All right, no one at Dr. Burke's place, no one, I assume Councilman Buscaino at your location, and
No.
Supervisor Rutherford, no one was there, I believe, right?
Good to hear.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will next meet on January 13th. So I want to wish all of you happy holidays and a safe holiday season. So thank you all, and this meeting is adjourned until January 13th.